Hi guys, welcome to this video. This is the 8th part of this tutorial series on Angular 17. In this video, I will be talking about dependency injection and services. This is very important topic. So I've already created a new Angular 17 project with name 5.di services, and it contains this default component with name app, and you can see that it contains nothing. I've removed the default variable which gets created, and it has nothing in the HTML file, and I'm already running this project and you can see that it's not showing anything over here. So first of all, I'm going to create a new service in my project. So I'm already inside that project in my terminal. So I'm going to write ngg, and then I'm going to write s for service, and then I can write the folder name, and then I can name the service. So for now, let's give the name of the service services slash data. You can see that it has created this folder with the name services, and it has created this default spec file which is for unit testing. This is not the topic for us. And then this is the main file data.service.ts, and this service file contains the data. We can use this file to call any kind of API. We can use this file to compile the data and use this data in any component. So services can be used to share data between multiple components as well. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to instantiate a new variable with the constant data for now, and then I'm going to return this data in my component and use that in that app component. Okay, so now in this data service, I'm going to create get data function, and this is going to return an array. So let's say data 1, data 2, data 3. I need to add the colon over here. All right, I will be showing you how we can integrate API, but for now, let's use this function to return the data to the component. Okay, so here, first of all, let me import that service which I have just created. So import, and I can use data service from the same path, services data.service. And now in this component there is this providers array, and I can add this data service. In the previous versions of Angular, we had to add this provider in our app module, but since in this new version there is no app module file, so we need to add the providers array directly within the component wherever we need to use any particular service. Okay, so in this component, first of all, let's come inside, and here I'm going to write data, and this is going to be the array of string equals to empty array. All right, and then let's use the constructor private data service, and this is where the concept called dependency injection comes in. So I am creating an object for that service inside this constructor, and this process of creating this variable for any service in any component is called the dependency injection, so that we are not exposing what this service actually contains. We are separating out the logic of this data service versus the place where we are implementing that service. Okay, so now using this particular variable, I'm calling that function dot get data and storing that data in this variable which I have just created over here. All right, so now I can use and show this data over here. So let's see what it prints. npm run start. So let me verify, yes, this is the data. And now you can see that it is actually calling this service. This service is returning this data in this component, and then whenever this component is going to be mounted, whenever this is going to be loaded, this constructor will be automatically triggered. It's going to create a new object out of that service, and using that object, it is calling the function within that service. So this is the concept belonging to object oriented programming. I hope that you have an understanding of object oriented programming from JavaScript if you have learned that already, which I expect you to already have a knowledge about JavaScript. Okay, so now it's time to learn about calling an API. That is a very important topic. So here I'm going to use a public API. Let's call it JSON placeholder posts. So this is the public API which I'm going to use. So let's copy this and I'm going to come in this service and I'm going to create a new variable, private API URL equals to this one. Okay, and now in order to call this particular API we need to use HTTP client module from Angular. So I'm going to import HTTP client from Angular common HTTP, and also whenever we call any API in Angular it returns an observable. So observables are the ones which compile the data by calling any kind of API, and against those observables we have the subscriber. So any component which is going to use or call that particular API, that component will become the subscriber to that particular observable which is being returned from any service. Okay, so let me show you what do I mean by that. So but to convert any response from an API we need to import observable from Rx.js, and then inside this particular I'm going to write get post observable. Actually there is tab 9 pro extension I've already installed. It is helping me to actually write some code. Sometimes it gives us a right code, sometimes it gives us wrong code, uh, but for now let's move with it. So any, and then it is using HTTP get and then API URL. So I need to instantiate with the constructor and create a new variable. So constructor private HTTP from HTTP client. Okay, so just like this is also we are using this module creating a new variable, you can also call it a dependency injection. And now it is throwing an error. The reason is that if you have some experience in the previous versions of Angular, you might be familiar that whenever we try to use anything like HTTP client, or we need to add its reference in the app module file, that is called the HTTP client module. But in this particular version of Angular we don't have app module, so we need to come inside this main.ts. It is actually using app config, so we can open up the app config, and here we need to add the reference for that. So I'm going to write this one, provide HTTP client with fetch, and here comma I need to write provide HTTP client with fetch, like this. Now when I'll save it you will see that it is going to remove any kind of error, and now everything is working fine in our project. So this is going to make HTTP client module available in all the components in whole project. All right, so now let's come back over here. But one thing I want to show you that in TypeScript in Angular we can use the interfaces or the types rather than using the any type. Any type does not makes our code cleaner. So what I'm gonna do is, let me see if from the terminal from Angular CI we can create an interface file or not. So ngg interface, and interfaces is the folder name which I like to create, and then I'm going to create the name of the interface file to data, and let's see if it creates that. Yes, it has created this, and this is the data it has just created. Okay, so this is actually the data type. If you remember, here we are using the string data type. We can use the number, object, and array data type, means that the value that will be stored in this particular variable will be of type whatever we write over here. So here in this service I'm returning an observable of type any. We need to define the data type, that what kind of response will be returned by this API. So this is the response that will be returned. So this is an object, so we can use user ID, title, and the body. So let me create an interface. So this is the data type which I have just created over here, data. Okay, so let me close it, and now in this service I'm going to import that data from that interface. Okay, so let me copy this and paste it over here. So this is not just an object, this is an array of objects. Okay, so here we also need to add over here that this is going to be the return type. So data of type array. All right, so this will make sure that only these 4 properties will be returned from this API, and it makes things easy in terms of type checking. Okay, so now let's come back to our component, and in this component we are going to create a new variable. This is going to be the posts, and this is going to be the of type data which we have just created from the interface. So I'm going to import that data interface over here as well. So data from that interface. Okay, so this is going to be like this. So now I need to create a built-in lifecycle function ng on init. This function automatically triggers whenever our component gets mounted. So in the previous versions of Angular, we had to implement this by implementing ng on init and importing that as well. But in this version, it is not required. We can simply write this lifecycle hook over here. Okay, so now I can write this dot data service dot get posts dot subscribe, and then I can write next response of type data array, and then this dot posts equal to response, and after that we can check for errors as well. Okay, we can define this error type properly. So we are calling this particular function, it is returning an observable. That's why we are subscribing over here. Okay, so it's going to wait until this returns a response, and this is going to be received over here with the same data type which is being added over here. Okay, so now the response is going to be stored in this variable which we have just created over here. All right, so now I'm going to iterate through this posts array in order to show the data. So for now, let's show the title and the body in our HTML. So here in the HTML, I'm going to first of all add the title. So let's add the posts, and then I'm going to create a div, and here we can use ng for, or we can use the add for control flow, which I have already created a video about, but still we can use ng for directive as well. For now, let's use ng for equals to let post of posts, and now we can use h3 post dot title, and then we can use p tag post dot body. So let's save it. I think it is going to throw an error, so let's see. The reason is that I'm using this particular directive, but I have not imported that and store it in this imports array. So now let's do that. So I'm going to write ng for from Angular common. So let's copy this and add it in this array. Okay, so now the error is gone. Now let's see, let's refresh. So now you can see that it has called that API, and the same response which is being shown over here is being used over here. All right, how cool is that? We have actually used the services, we have used the concept of interfaces for the type checking, we have called an API, we have created this observable to return the response, and then using the subscribe function we are storing the response in this particular variable and then showing the data of the API in this HTML file. All right, if you have any question you can comment below. I will try to reply you as soon as possible. So for now, that's pretty much it for this video. Do subscribe my channel and do like my video as well.